The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something tears through that web? Something forged in hellfire and vengeance, bound by no cosmic power the Jedi or Sith have ever known. The answer came screaming through the atmosphere of Tatooine, trailing flames that burned without fuel, announcing the arrival of judgment itself. The twin suns hung low over the dune sea when the sky split open, not with the familiar blue-white streaks of hyperspace, but with a wound, a jagged tear in reality itself that bled orange and crimson fire. Moisture farmers working their vaporators looked up in time to see something fall from that impossible rift. It burned as it descended, a meteor of supernatural flame that carved a black scar across the evening sky. The impact came 3 miles outside Mos Eisley, and the shockwave rattled windows in the spaceport cantina. Sand fused into glass in a perfect circle around the crash site. And at the center, surrounded by flames that danced without consuming, lay a motorcycle that had no right to exist. Johnny Blaze's last memory was Mephisto's laughter. The demon had tried another banishment, another scheme to rid himself of his most troublesome Ghost Rider. But something had gone wrong, or perhaps perfectly right, depending on your perspective. The spell had intersected with something else, some vast cosmic current that Mephisto hadn't anticipated. Johnny remembered being pulled through dimensions, through the spaces between realities, while the spirit of vengeance screamed in his skull. Then, impact. He pushed himself up from scorched sand, his human form still intact. That was unusual. The spirit typically seized control during violence or danger, and falling through dimensional barriers definitely qualified as both. Johnny touched his face, feeling skin instead of bone, and frowned. The air tasted wrong. Dry, yes, he'd been in deserts before, but there was something else, an energy that pressed against his senses like static electricity before a storm. It made the spirit restless, agitated in a way he'd rarely felt. "Easy," Johnny muttered, speaking to the demon riding his soul. "Let's figure out where we are before you start burning things." The spirit of vengeance didn't answer in words. It never did. But he felt its hunger, its need to punish the guilty, momentarily suppressed by confusion. Whatever this place was, it operated under different rules. The hellfire that usually coursed through the rider's veins felt muted wasn't the right word. Altered, like trying to play a guitar with different tuning. Johnny climbed onto his motorcycle, miraculously intact despite falling through dimensional rifts, and kicked it to life. The engine roared with supernatural power, flames licking from the exhaust ports. He needed civilization, answers, and probably a strong drink. The glow on the horizon suggested a settlement. He gunned the throttle, and the bike's wheels carved through sand, leaving trails of fire that burned for seconds before winking out.
If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Mos Eisley Spaceport sprawled across the desert like a diseased wound. Johnny had seen plenty of rough towns. He'd ridden through biker bars, demon-infested hellholes, and crime-ridden cities. But this place operated on a different level of barely controlled chaos. The architecture was wrong. Domed buildings of sand-colored stone, strange symbols he couldn't read, and technology that looked simultaneously advanced and ancient. Spacecraft of wildly varying designs sat in docking bays, while creatures that definitely weren't human haggled in the streets. He'd found aliens, or been found by them. Either way, Earth's problems seemed very far away. Johnny killed the engine 2 blocks from what looked like a cantina, the universal sign of information available here apparently transcended dimensions. Beings of a dozen species gave him and his flaming motorcycle a wide berth. A few reached for weapons, more simply fled. Smart choice. The cantina's interior was dark, crowded, and smelled like a distillery had exploded in an alien zoo. A band played music that hurt his ears, some kind of jazz performed by beings with too many or too few appendages. Johnny pushed toward the bar, ignoring the conversations that died as he passed. The bartender, a humanoid with a head like a hammerhead shark, gestured sharply. "No droids," it said in accented basic that Johnny's brain somehow translated automatically. Dimensional travel perks, apparently. And no, what are you? Thirsty. What passes for whiskey here? The bartender's eye stalks swiveled nervously. You're not from the core worlds. Not from anywhere I recognize. And that's saying something. Just passing through. What's the local situation? A Rodian 2 stools down laughed, a chittering sound. You picked a bad time to visit Tatooine, stranger. The Empire's been cracking down. More stormtroopers every day. They're looking for rebels, force sensitives, anyone who might cause trouble. The alien's multifaceted eyes fixed on Johnny. You cause trouble? Before Johnny could answer, the spirit surged. Not a full transformation, just a flicker. His eyes flared with hellfire for an instant, and the temperature in the cantina spiked 20 degrees. Every being with survival instincts felt it. The wrongness, the hunger, the judgment. The Rodian fell backward off his stool. The bartender dropped a glass. And from a shadowed booth in the corner, a figure in white armor stood. A stormtrooper. Not alone. 3 more emerged from various positions in the cantina. A patrol. Standard Empire presence in a spaceport known for smugglers and criminals.
"You there," the lead trooper called, his voice filtered through his helmet. "Identify yourself. Imperial records show no arrival of your vessel." Johnny's jaw tightened. He dealt with corrupt cops, government agents, and authoritarian thugs across Earth. The armor was different, but the attitude was universal. "Like I said, just passing through." "That's not how it works here." The trooper's hand moved toward his weapon, some kind of rifle with a distinct energy signature. "You'll need to come with us for processing. All arrivals must be logged and—" The spirit wouldn't be silent any longer. Johnny felt the transformation ripple through him like a wave of liquid fire. His flesh burned away, replaced by bone wreathed in hellfire. His eyes became pits of flame that saw not just the physical world, but the sins of every soul around him. The leather jacket he wore ignited, but didn't burn, instead becoming part of the rider's supernatural armor. And in his hand, manifesting from nowhere and everywhere, a chain of blessed iron that burned with the fires of perdition. The Ghost Rider stood in a Mos Eisley cantina, and for the first time in its ancient existence, it felt the Force. Not as a power it could wield, not as energy it could channel, but as a presence, vast, interconnected, flowing through every living thing in this strange galaxy. The spirit of vengeance had judged souls across dimensions and realities, but this was new. Here, the very fabric of existence hummed with an energy that responded to emotion, intention, and will. Light and dark, balanced on a knife's edge. And these armored men? The rider looked at them with burning eyes and saw their sins. Saw the villages burned on orders from above, saw the prisoners executed, saw the fear they inspired and the cruelty they enacted in service to their empire. Guilty. What in the lead stormtrooper managed before Ghost Rider's chain lashed out. It wrapped around the trooper's rifle and yanked, pulling the weapon apart in a shower of sparks.
The other troopers opened fire, blaster bolts, coherent energy projectiles that would have vaporized flesh struck the rider's skeletal form and dissipated against hellfire that burned hotter than any fusion reactor. The cantina erupted into chaos. Patrons scrambled for exits, the band stopped playing, and the Ghost Rider advanced on the stormtroopers with the inevitability of judgment itself. One trooper made the mistake of meeting the rider's gaze. The Penance Stare connected, and immediately the Ghost Rider felt the difference. The trooper's mind wasn't like human minds. There was structure there, conditioning, layers of indoctrination that wrapped around his consciousness like armor. But beneath that, sins festered. The rider forced him to feel every moment of pain he'd inflicted, every terror he'd inspired, every life he had ended. The stormtrooper screamed. His armor couldn't protect his soul. He collapsed, catatonic, his mind shattered by experiencing decades of suffering in seconds. The other troopers fled. They ran from the cantina, broadcasting emergency codes, calling for reinforcements, and Ghost Rider let them go. The spirit's hunger was momentarily satisfied. Justice had been served. But as Johnny Blaze reasserted control and the flames receded, leaving him human once more, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He'd just announced his presence to whatever empire controlled this world. And if the technology, the aliens, and the strange energy he'd felt were any indication, he'd landed in something far more complicated than a demon deal gone wrong. Through the cantina doorway, he could see stormtroopers regrouping in the street. More were coming. And in the distance, the distinctive whine of spacecraft engines suggested airborne support was on its way. Johnny Blaze cracked his knuckles, feeling hellfire simmer just beneath his skin. The spirit of vengeance whispered in his mind, eager, hungry for the guilty souls that apparently filled this galaxy. "All right," he said to the empty cantina. "Let's see what passes for law and order around here." The twin suns were setting, casting Mos Eisley in shades of orange and red. It looked almost like the flames of hell. Ghost Rider found that oddly appropriate.
The Imperial garrison on Tatooine operated out of a fortified compound on Mos Eisley's northern edge, a utilitarian structure of duracrete and steel that stood in stark contrast to the organic chaos of the spaceport. Within its command center, Captain Vrost reviewed the security footage for the third time, his pale face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic displays. What he saw defied every regulation in the Imperial manual. "Replay timestamp 1847, Sector 7, he ordered. The droid operator complied. The hologram showed the cantina exterior. Stormtroopers approached a humanoid figure. Words exchanged, then transformation. The figure's flesh burned away in seconds, replaced by a flaming skeleton that moved with predatory grace. Energy weapons proved useless. One trooper collapsed after direct eye contact, now sedated in the medical bay, mumbling incoherently about judgment and fire. "Analysis?" Vrost demanded. "Unknown entity, Captain," the intelligence officer reported. "No match in Imperial databases. The energy signature doesn't correlate with any known technology. Blasters, lightsabers, thermal detonators. It's something else entirely." "Force sensitive?" "Possibly, but the energy readings are wrong. The Inquisitorius uses the Force as a weapon. This is different, more primal. The recording equipment actually overheated during the transformation." Vrost leaned back in his chair. Tatooine was supposed to be a backwater assignment. Smugglers, moisture farmers, and the occasional hut problem. Not burning demons that shrugged off blaster fire. Have we transmitted this to High Command? Standard protocol requires. I know what protocol requires, Lieutenant. Have we transmitted? The officer hesitated. Not yet, sir. I thought perhaps we should verify the authenticity before bothering. Transmit it now. Mark it priority Alpha. If this thing is a new rebel weapon or some kind of separatist holdout technology, Command needs to know immediately. Frost paused. And send a coded message to the Inquisitorius. If there's even a chance this is Force-related, they'll want to investigate. Sir, the Inquisitors haven't operated on Tatooine in over a year. Sending for them might be above your pay grade, Lieutenant. Send the message. The officer saluted and moved to comply. Vrost turned back to the hologram, watching the skeleton wrapped in flames advance on his troopers. 30 years in the Imperial military, and he'd never seen anything like it. The Empire had protocols for rebels, pirates, and even rogue Jedi. But this was something new. 20,000 miles above Tatooine, in the cold void of space, the Destaviter maintained standard orbit. The Imperial Star Destroyer was a monument to the Empire's might, over a mile of weapons, armor, and crew dedicated to enforcing order across the galaxy. And on its meditation platform, surrounded by the silence of space, Darth Vader felt a disturbance. Not in the Force itself, though that was certainly present. This was something adjacent to it, parallel. Like a note played in a different key that somehow harmonized with the cosmic symphony he'd learned to read. The Dark Lord's breathing apparatus cycled with mechanical precision as he extended his awareness, probing the disturbance's origin. Tatooine. Of course it was Tatooine. The desert world he'd been born on, the planet he'd left behind in pursuit of power, kept drawing his attention. First, the destruction of the Death Star blueprints, traced to a protocol droid that had passed through Mos Eisley, then rumors of Obi-Wan's presence, and now this. Lord Vader. The voice crackled through his helmet's comlink. Admiral Piet, cautious and competent. We've received a priority transmission from the surface garrison. They've encountered an unidentified hostile. The recording is unique. Display it. The hologram materialized before him, grainy security footage showing a man transform into a burning skeleton. Vader watched without comment as the entity decimated stormtroopers with contempt bordering on ease. The chain weapon it wielded moved with supernatural precision, and those eyes, pits of flame that seemed to judge rather than simply see. Analysis, Vader asked. The garrison believes it may be Force-sensitive, my lord. They've requested Inquisitorious support. Vader's hands clenched. He knew every significant Force user in the galaxy, had hunted them systematically for years, purging the Jedi and their sympathizers until only shadows remained. This was not a Jedi, not a Sith. Not even a Force-sensitive who'd escaped his notice. This was something else, something that radiated power without touching the Force at all. Impossible. Yet he watched it happen on the recording. "Prepare my shuttle," Vader commanded. "I will investigate personally." "My lord, is that wise? If this is a trap, then the rebels have made a grave mistake." Vader terminated the connection and strode from the meditation chamber. Around him, crew members hurried to clear his path, their fear palpable in the Force. Good. Fear was honest. Fear was useful. But as Vader boarded his shuttle and felt the ship detach from the Devastator, he acknowledged something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Curiosity. Whatever this burning creature was, it represented something new in a galaxy he'd thought fully catalogued. And if it posed a threat to the Emperor's rule,
to order itself. Then it would be destroyed. The shuttle entered Tatooine's atmosphere, and through the Force, Vader reached out again toward the disturbance. It pulsed like a dark star, radiating judgment and hunger. Not the cold ambition of the dark side or the serene detachment of the light. Something older, primal. "Interesting," Vader murmured to the empty shuttle. "Very interesting indeed." Johnny Blaze had acquired a speeder, liberated from a particularly insistent bounty hunter who'd made the mistake of drawing a weapon. The rider had judged him guilty of 17 murders for profit and left him unconscious in an alley, his mind filled with the suffering he'd caused. The speeder itself was a hovering contraption that moved through repulsor technology. Johnny didn't understand, but it worked, and that was enough. He'd fled Mos Eisley after the Cantina incident, not from fear. The spirit of vengeance didn't know fear, but from pragmatism. He was in an unknown galaxy, surrounded by alien species and technology centuries beyond Earth's, facing what appeared to be a fascist government with unlimited resources. Picking fights without understanding the battlefield was how you got killed, or worse. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, sand dunes rolling like frozen waves. The twin suns had fully set, replaced by unfamiliar stars that formed constellations Johnny didn't recognize. No Orion, no Big Dipper, just confirmation that he was very, very far from home. The spirit stirred restlessly in his chest. It had tasted the sins of this galaxy and found them abundant. The stormtroopers were merely soldiers, following orders, but through the Penance Stare, the rider had glimpsed the larger structure they served, an empire built on fear and oppression, spreading across thousands of worlds. The sins were galactic in scale. And yet the spirit also felt the other presence, that vast cosmic energy that flowed through everything here. It wasn't hellfire, wasn't demonic or divine in the way Johnny understood those terms. It simply was, a fundamental force of nature that connected all living things. The rider had encountered many supernatural powers across dimensions, but this was unique. It resisted judgment. It couldn't be burned away or purified because it wasn't corrupt. It was neutral, a tool that could be used for good or evil, depending on the wielder. "Great," Johnny muttered, guiding the speeder over a rocky outcropping. The explosion came without warning. One moment, empty desert. The next, the sand erupted in a geyser of superheated glass as an energy blast struck 10 meters to his left. Johnny jerked the speeder right, instinct taking over. More blasts followed, precise, calculated, walking their fire toward him. He looked up and saw them, TIE fighters. 3 of the distinctive hexagonal spacecraft screamed through the night sky, their twin ion engines howling. Their weapons tracked his movements with computer-assisted precision, turning the desert into a killing field. The spirit surged forward, eager to transform, but Johnny held it back, barely. "Not yet. Need to see what they've got first." He pushed the speeder to its limits, weaving between dunes as energy blasts vaporized sand around him. The TIE fighters adjusted their attack pattern, boxing him in. Professional, military, they weren't trying to kill him immediately. They were hurting him, forcing him towards something. Johnny crested a dune and saw it. An Imperial transport had landed a kilometer ahead, disgorging stormtroopers who were setting up a perimeter. Dozens of them, with weapons trained on his approach vector. And standing in their center, a figure in black armor that reflected the starlight. Even at this distance, Johnny felt it. Power, authority, and something else. That cosmic energy he'd sensed earlier, but twisted, corrupted. This wasn't some common soldier, or even an officer. This was a predator. The figure raised one hand and Johnny's speeder died, just stopped. Every system shut down simultaneously and the craft dropped 3 feet to the sand with bone-jarring impact. Johnny rolled free, coming up in a crouch, and watched the black armored figure approach.
Darth Vader walked through the desert with the confidence of someone who'd never met an opponent he couldn't kill. The stormtroopers parted for him like water around stone, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the distance, deep, mechanically filtered, absolutely certain. "You will come with me. Resistance is futile." Johnny stood slowly, brushing sand from his jacket. The spirit of vengeance screamed in his mind, demanding release. It recognized a predator when it saw one. More than that, it recognized guilt. This being in black armor carried sins that made the stormtroopers look like children. "That's not how this works. I don't take orders, especially not from someone who smells like murder and tyranny." Vader stopped 20 meters away. His helmet tilted slightly, as if examining a curious insect. "You are not from this galaxy. Your energy signature is unfamiliar. But you will submit, or you will die." "Third option," Johnny said, and let the spirit take control. The transformation was instant. Flesh burned away in a corona of hellfire that turned night into day. The Ghost Rider stood in the Tatooine desert, chain manifesting in skeletal hands, flames licking from every bone. The temperature spiked, sand fused into glass beneath his feet, and those eyes, burning with judgment itself, fixed on Darth Vader. For the first time in years, Darth Vader felt something unexpected: uncertainty. This creature radiated power that existed outside the Force. His connection to the dark side gave him no advantage, no leverage. It was like facing a force of nature that didn't care about Sith or Jedi philosophy. "Interesting," Darth Vader said. Then he raised his hand and unleashed the Force. An invisible wave of telekinetic energy slammed into Ghost Rider with enough force to crush Durasteel. The sand around him exploded outward. Any normal being would have been pulverized. But Ghost Rider stood unmoved, Hellfire flaring brighter in response. The Force, for all its power, couldn't touch the spirit of vengeance. It existed on a different plane, bound by different rules. Vader felt that realization crystallize. This wasn't a Force battle. This was something else entirely. "Your power is meaningless here," Ghost Rider spoke, his voice like grinding stone and crackling flames. "I see your sins, Anakin Skywalker. I see the younglings, the betrayal, the murders committed in service to your dark master. You are guilty, and guilt must burn." Vader's breathing hitched, barely perceptible, but Ghost Rider heard it. The name, his true name, spoken by a creature that shouldn't know it, that couldn't know it. "Kill it," Vader commanded. The stormtroopers opened fire. Dozens of blaster bolts converged on Ghost Rider from every angle, a kill zone that would have vaporized a battalion. The rider's chain whipped through the air, deflecting some shots while others struck his skeletal frame and dissipated harmlessly. Hellfire exploded outward in a wave, and stormtroopers screamed as their armor superheated. Then Ghost Rider locked eyes with Darth Vader. The Penance Stare connected, and immediately both beings recoiled. Vader felt the stare's power trying to force him to experience his victim's suffering, felt the weight of every sin, every murder, every betrayal. But his connection to the dark side provided protection. The Force wrapped around his consciousness like armor, deflecting the worst of the assault. It wasn't immunity. Pain still lanced through him, memories bubbling up that he'd long suppressed. But it was resistance. And Ghost Rider felt something equally unexpected. The Penance Stare worked both ways against this opponent. Vader's power, this force, pushed back, showed the rider glimpses of a larger picture, an empire spanning thousands of worlds, an emperor who manipulated galactic events like a puppeteer. And this warrior in black armor, once a hero, now a monster serving an even greater evil. The connection broke. Both beings staggered back. Vader's lightsaber ignited, a blade of pure crimson energy that hummed with barely contained power. "You are powerful," he admitted, "but power alone is insufficient." Ghost Rider's chain burst into flames.
Then let's see whose judgment burns hotter. They clashed in the Tatooine desert, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.
The clash between Hellfire and the Force sent shockwaves across the desert. Vader's lightsaber carved through the air with precision honed over decades, each strike calculated to sever limbs or pierce vital organs. But Ghost Rider had no vital organs, only bones wreathed in supernatural flame that burned hotter with every passing second. The rider's chain met the lightsaber in a shower of sparks and hellfire, the blessed iron refusing to yield to the plasma blade. Vader pressed his attack, augmenting his strikes with telekinetic force. He hurled boulders, ripped chunks of sandstone from nearby formations, and crushed the ground beneath Ghost Rider's feet. The Dark Lord had killed Jedi Masters with less effort. But this burning skeleton simply walked through the assault, chain whipping out to wrap around Vader's extended arm. The Hellfire burned. Not flesh. Vader's cybernetic limb was mostly immune to heat, but something deeper. The chain seared at his connection to the Force itself, disrupting his concentration. Vader released a pulse of dark-side energy, shattering the chain's grip, and backflipped 20 meters with Force-enhanced agility. "You fight well for a dead man," Ghost Rider observed, his voice echoing across the battlefield. Around them, the remaining stormtroopers had retreated to a safe distance, their weapons useless against either combatant. The TIE fighters circled overhead but didn't fire, their pilots smart enough to recognize they'd only hit their own commander. "I am more than alive. I am inevitable. The dark side grants me power beyond your comprehension." "The dark side," Ghost Rider repeated. "I've faced demons, devils, and gods. Your darkness is just another flavor of damnation." The rider advanced, each step leaving burning footprints in the sand. "And damnation is my specialty." Vader reached deep into the Force, channeling his rage and pain into raw power. Electricity erupted from his fingertips, not the refined torture technique Palpatine favored, but a crude explosion of dark-side energy. The electricity struck Ghost Rider square in the chest and absorbed. The Hellfire flared brighter, feeding on the attack's energy. For the first time, Vader felt something he rarely allowed: doubt. His arsenal of Force powers proved ineffective. His lightsaber couldn't cut what was already dead. And the creature's own power operated on principles that defied everything he'd learned about combat and the Force. "Enough," Vader declared. He deactivated his lightsaber and straightened to his full, imposing height. "This battle serves no purpose. You cannot kill me. I cannot kill you. We are at an impasse." Ghost Rider paused, his chain slowly coiling around his skeletal arm. The spirit of vengeance hungered to continue, to judge this guilty soul fully and completely. But Johnny Blaze, still present beneath the flames, recognized truth when he heard it. They could fight for hours and accomplish nothing but destruction. "You wear your sins like armor. Every life you've taken, every betrayal, every moment of suffering you've caused, I see them all. And one day, Anakin Skywalker, you will burn for them." Vader's breathing apparatus cycled heavily. The name again. This creature knew things it shouldn't, couldn't know. "Who are you?" "Judgment," Ghost Rider replied simply. Then the flames receded. The transformation reversed, and Johnny Blaze stood in the desert once more, human and exhausted. The spirit's power always took a toll, especially when unleashed at full strength. "Name's Johnny, and I'm starting to think I landed in one hell of a messed-up galaxy." Vader studied the human before him, unremarkable physically, average height, lean build, wearing strange clothing of unfamiliar design, but the power within him was undeniable. "You are not from the known galaxy, your origin point?"
"Earth," Johnny said. "Different dimension, probably. Was dealing with a demon problem when something went wrong. Ended up here." He gestured at the desert, the stormtroopers, the alien sky. "Your turn. What's your story? besides the obvious dark armor, commands army, probably evil thing you've got going. I serve the Emperor. I maintain order across the galaxy, and I eliminate threats to Imperial authority. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber hilt, not threatening, but ready. You have demonstrated significant power. The Empire could use someone of your abilities. Johnny laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Let me guess, join or die? That's always the pitch with you fascist types. Thanks, but I've turned down better offers from actual demons. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. You have attacked Imperial personnel, destroyed Imperial property. The penalty is death, unless you submit to Imperial service. Third option, Johnny said, echoing his earlier statement. I walk away, you walk away, and we both avoid finding out what happens when I stop holding back. The standoff stretched. Vader could order his troopers to fire, but he'd seen how effective that was. Could continue the fight himself, but the outcome would be stalemate at best. And there was something about this Johnny Blaze that intrigued him. The man showed no fear, faced a dark lord of the Sith and treated him like an equal, or worse, an obstacle to be worked around. You cannot hide on Tatooine. The Empire controls this world. Every settlement, every spaceport. You will be hunted. Been hunted before. Usually ends poorly for the hunters. He turned toward the speeder he'd been riding, now a smoking wreck. Damn, guess I'm walking. Wait. The word surprised Vader as he spoke it, but tactical necessity overrode pride. You seek to leave Tatooine. I seek to understand where the hell I am and how to get home, but yeah, leaving this dustball would be a good start. Vader considered. This being was powerful, unpredictable, and possessed knowledge he shouldn't have. Killing him appeared impossible. Containing him would be difficult. But there was perhaps another option. The Empire has resources, technology, information networks spanning the galaxy. If there is a way to return you to your dimension, Imperial scientists could find it. In exchange for what? Becoming your attack dog? In exchange for information. Your power operates outside the Force. That makes you unique and valuable. Help us understand your abilities, and the Empire will assist your search for home. It was a lie, of course. Vader had no intention of returning this creature to its origin point. But the lie might keep it cooperative long enough to either find a way to control it or eliminate it properly. The Emperor would want to study this being, might even see potential for a weapon that could challenge Force users without relying on the Force itself. Johnny read the offer for what it was, a temporary truce wrapped in false promises. But he was in an unfamiliar galaxy, with no allies, no resources, and no plan. Playing along might give him time to learn the landscape. I'll think about it, but I'm not making any deals until I see more of what this galaxy is about. Your empire sounds like bad news from where I'm standing. Then see for yourself. Mos Eisley has many faces. Perhaps you should explore them before making assumptions. He gestured, and the stormtroopers began withdrawing to their transport. I will return to my ship. When you are ready to discuss terms, contact the Imperial garrison. Ask for Lord Vader. They will arrange a meeting.
Lord Vader, Johnny repeated. That's your name? Sounds like something a villain would choose. Names hold power, Mr. Blaze. Anakin Skywalker is dead. I killed him myself. Johnny felt the spirit stir at those words. Self-murder, metaphorical or not, carried its own weight of sin. Yeah, I can see that. The question is, what are you gonna do about it? Vader didn't answer. He simply turned and walked toward his transport, cape billowing in the desert wind. The stormtroopers followed in disciplined formation. Within minutes, the Imperial forces had lifted off, leaving Johnny alone in the desert with burning footprints and the wreckage of his borrowed speeder. "Well," Johnny said to the empty night, "that could have gone worse." The spirit of vengeance disagreed. It had tasted Vader's guilt and found it overwhelming. Decades of atrocities committed in service to power and a twisted sense of order. The man in black armor was drowning in his sins, and the rider hungered to deliver judgment. But even the spirit recognized tactical reality. This galaxy was vast, complex, and filled with threats they didn't understand. Charging in blind would accomplish nothing. Johnny started walking. Mos Eisley was 10 miles behind him, but his supernatural constitution made the distance manageable. Besides, he needed time to think, to process what he'd learned. This force that Vader wielded, it had resisted the Penance Stare. Not perfectly, but enough to matter. That suggested beings who mastered it might pose a real threat. And if Vader was just a servant, what kind of monster was his Emperor? Mos Eisley at night was somehow worse than during the day. The criminal element emerged from whatever holes they hid in, and the streets filled with beings of questionable intent and worse hygiene. Johnny walked through the spaceport district, drawing stares but no challenges. Word had spread about the burning skeleton that had demolished Imperial troops. Even the most aggressive thugs knew when to avoid trouble. He found a different cantina, smaller, darker, and somehow even more disreputable than the first. The clientele consisted of smugglers, bounty hunters, and various species that Johnny couldn't identify. A Twi'lek dancing girl performed on a small stage while gamblers threw credits at a sabacc table. Johnny took a seat at the bar and waited. The bartender, an ancient Deveronian with filed horns, set down a glass of something purple and bubbling. "Heard you had an interesting evening. Not many people walk away from Lord Vader. Is that unusual?" "It's impossible. Vader kills Force sensitives for the Emperor, been doing it for years. The Jedi are extinct because of him." The Deveronian leaned closer. "You're not a Jedi. Not anything I recognize, but you've got power. That makes you dangerous and valuable." "Everyone keeps telling me that. What's the angle?" "The angle," a new voice interrupted, "is that people with power have options in this galaxy, especially people the Empire can't easily kill." Johnny turned. The speaker was human, or close enough. Female, mid-30s, wearing practical clothing and a blaster on her hip. Her face was weathered by sun and hardship, and her eyes held the look of someone who'd survived by being smarter than her opponents. "Name's Terran," she said, sliding onto the stool next to him. "I represent interested parties, people who might benefit from your unique situation."
Freedom fighters, the good guys fighting the evil empire? Terran smiled. Nothing's that simple in this galaxy. But yes, the rebellion could use someone like you. Someone who can stand toe-to-toe with Vader and walk away. That kind of power could change the war. War? Johnny repeated. Vader mentioned maintaining order. You're saying there's an active rebellion against his empire? Active, yes. Successful? Terran's smile faded. That's harder to answer. The Empire has unlimited resources, ships, troops, weapons. We have passion and desperation. It's not a fair fight. The spirit stirred in Johnny's chest. Injustice, oppression. the suffering of innocents under tyrannical rule. These were things the rider understood instinctively. But Johnny had learned to be cautious. Rebels could be just as guilty as the systems they fought against. Good intentions didn't automatically mean clean hands. Tell me about your empire. The real version, not propaganda. Terran ordered a drink and spoke for the next hour. She told him about Palpatine, the Emperor who had transformed a democratic republic into an authoritarian nightmare, about the clone wars that had devastated the galaxy, about the Jedi Order, guardians of peace who had been betrayed and exterminated, about planets enslaved, populations oppressed, and a military machine that crushed dissent wherever it appeared. Johnny listened, and through Terran's words, the spirit of vengeance compiled its own judgment. This empire was guilty, not in the abstract way of governments that made imperfect choices, but genuinely, horrifically guilty. It had murdered billions, enslaved entire species, built weapons capable of destroying planets, something Terran mentioned almost casually, as if planet-destroying superweapons were just another Tuesday in this galaxy. So why tell me all this? What do you want? The rebellion has a cell on Tatooine. Small, mostly intelligence gathering and smuggling operations, but we've identified an Imperial target, a supply convoy moving through the Dune Sea tomorrow. Food, medicine, equipment, all stolen from local populations and being shipped off-world to feed the Imperial war machine. She met his eyes. Help us hit that convoy. See for yourself what the Empire does to people who can't fight back. Then decide if you want to be neutral in this war. Johnny considered. The spirit was eager, hungry for justice against the guilty, but jumping into an alien rebellion without fully understanding the stakes was dangerous. On the other hand, sitting idle while atrocities happened around him had never been his style. One condition. I'm not your soldier. I help with this convoy. I'm doing it my way. And afterward, I make my own choices. No strings. Fair enough. Terran extended her hand. Deal? Johnny shook it. Her grip was firm, calloused from hard work and harder fights. Deal. When do we move? Dawn. I'll send someone to collect you. Terran stood, tossed credits on the bar, and headed for the exit. At the doorway, she paused. One more thing. The Empire will be looking for you. Vader doesn't forget people who embarrass him. Watch your back. Always do, Johnny replied. After she left, the Devarian bartender refilled his glass. You're making dangerous friends, stranger. Story of my life, Johnny said, and drank deep. The purple liquid burned going down, not like Hellfire, but close enough to feel familiar. Outside, Tatooine's moons rose over the desert. Somewhere out there, the Empire planned, the rebellion plotted, and Ghost Rider awaited to deliver judgment on whoever deserved it most. The galaxy had no idea what it had unleashed.
Dawn on Tatooine arrived with brutal efficiency. Twin suns climbing above the horizon, transforming the desert from frigid cold to scorching heat within an hour. Johnny met Terran's contact in an alley behind a moisture vaporator repair shop, a Sulistan pilot named Nix, who spoke in rapid bursts of accented basic and kept checking his chronometer nervously. Imperial convoy leaves Mos Eisley garrison at 0800 hours, Nix explained, pulling up a holographic map from a handheld device. Standard route through Beggar's Canyon, then northeast toward the spaceport at Bestine. 3 armored transports, 2 ATST walkers for security, maybe 20 stormtroopers total. They're transporting medical supplies, confiscated from a moisture farmer collective. Families need those supplies, but Empire doesn't care. Johnny studied the map. The canyon was a natural choke point, all narrow passages and rock formations. Good for an ambush, bad for escape if things went wrong. How many people in your cell? 8, counting you and Terran, plus the families who will help load supplies after we secure the convoy. Nix's large eyes blinked nervously. Look, I know it's not much, but we've hit convoys before. Terran's good at this. And you, he gestured vaguely at Johnny. They say you fought Vader. Fought to a draw. Big difference. Still, anyone who can face Vader and live is, well, you're either incredibly powerful or incredibly lucky. Little of both, Johnny admitted. The spirit had been restless all night, eager to judge the Empire's sins more thoroughly. The Penance Stare glimpse into Vader's guilt had only whetted its appetite. But Johnny kept tight control. Losing himself to the rider's hunger in the middle of an operation was a good way to get innocent people killed. They met the rest of the cell at abandoned moisture farm, 3 miles from Beggar's Canyon. 7 beings of various species, humans, Rhodians, a Bith, and what Johnny learned was a Zabrak, all armed with aging blasters and desperate determination. Terran ran the briefing with military precision, outlining positions, timing, and extraction protocols. Our objective is the supplies. We're not here to kill Imperials if we can avoid it. Disable the transports, secure the cargo, and disappear before reinforcements arrive. Clean and efficient. What about the walkers? Asked a Rhodian named Tebow. ATSTs have reinforced armor and heavy weapons. Our blasters won't scratch them. Terran looked at Johnny. That's where our new friend comes in. Think you can handle 2 walkers? Johnny cracked his knuckles, feeling hellfire simmer beneath his skin. Yeah, I can handle them. Good. Everyone else focuses on the transports and troops. Nix, you're on speederbike with the medical scanner. Identify which transport has the supplies. Jor and Mila, you're on perimeter watch. Everyone else, standard ambush pattern. Questions? No one spoke. They'd done this before. Small raids against the Empire's overwhelming might. Victories measured in stolen supplies and freed prisoners, rather than territory or recognition. The rebellion's war was fought in the shadows, and these people were comfortable there. Move out, Terran commanded. Beggar's Canyon was a maze of rust-colored stone, carved by millennia of wind and rare water flows. Johnny positioned himself on a high ledge overlooking the main passage, while the rest of the cell spread throughout the canyon in predetermined positions. The plan was simple. Nix would signal which transport held the medical supplies, the team would disable that transport and its escorts, and Johnny would handle the walkers if they became a problem. Simple plans usually were the best. They also usually fell apart on first contact. The convoy appeared at 0815 hours, 15 minutes behind schedule, but otherwise as described. 3 massive repulsion lift transports hovered in formation, their armored hulls scarred from years of service. The ATST walkers flanked them, their chicken walker design looking almost comical, until Johnny saw the weapons mounted on their heads, heavy blasters and concussion grenades capable of leveling buildings.
Stormtroopers rode on the transport's running boards, weapons ready, professional, alert. These weren't the garrison troops Johnny had encountered in the cantina. These were veterans who'd survived ambushes before. Nix's voice crackled through the comm unit Johnny had been given. Middle transport, medical scanner confirmed supplies are there. Repeat, middle transport is the target. Terran's response was immediate. Execute.
The canyon erupted with blaster fire. The rebels opened up from concealed positions, their shots converging on the middle transport. Energy bolts splashed against armor plating, and stormtroopers returned fire with disciplined bursts. The lead ATST's head swiveled toward the closest shooter, a human named Yor, and fired. The heavy blaster obliterated the rock formation he'd been hiding behind, and Yor scrambled for new cover. "Walkers are moving to suppress," Terran shouted over the comm. "Ghost Rider, now would be good." Johnny stood on his ledge, watching the chaos below. The spirit of vengeance surged forward, hungry and eager. He didn't fight it this time, didn't hold back. He simply let the transformation take him. Hellfire consumed his flesh in an instant. Ghost Rider manifested fully, chain whipping into existence, flames exploding outward in a corona of supernatural heat. And then he jumped. 50 feet straight down, landing directly on the lead ATST's head. The walker's sensors immediately registered the temperature spike, over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. Alarms screamed inside the cockpit as the pilot fought to maintain control. Ghost Rider's chain wrapped around the walker's head section, superheated metal beginning to glow cherry red. The pilot tried to shake him off. The walker bucked and spun, its legs pistoning wildly. But Ghost Rider held on, hellfire pouring into the machine's systems. Circuits melted, hydraulics burst. And when the pilot made the fatal mistake of opening the cockpit hatch to escape, Ghost Rider looked inside. The Penance Stare connected. The pilot, a young man, maybe 25, experienced every moment of suffering he'd caused in Imperial service. The villages burned, the protesters shot, the families torn apart. He screamed, hands clawing at his helmet, and collapsed unconscious. The walker, now pilotless and critically damaged, toppled sideways and crashed into the canyon wall. One down. Ghost Rider leaped to the second ATST, but this pilot had seen what happened to his comrade. He opened fire immediately. Heavy blasters tracking the rider's movement. Energy bolts that could punch through Durasteel struck Ghost Rider's skeletal frame and dissipated against hellfire that burned hotter than fusion. The pilot kept firing anyway, panic overriding tactics, until Ghost Rider's chain shattered the walker's viewport. Glass exploded inward. The pilot raised his hands in surrender. Ghost Rider paused, judging. This one's sins were lighter, mostly following orders, some cruelty but no atrocities, guilty but not irredeemably so. "Run," Ghost Rider commanded, his voice grinding through the shattered viewport. The pilot didn't need to be told twice. He ejected from the cockpit and sprinted down the canyon, abandoning his walker. Ghost Rider turned his attention to the transports. The middle transport had stopped, its repulsors damaged by sustained blaster fire. Stormtroopers had formed a defensive perimeter around it, laying down suppressing fire that kept the rebels pinned. Terran and her team couldn't advance without taking casualties. But Ghost Rider didn't need to advance. He simply walked through the blaster fire like it didn't exist. "Hostile approaching!" a stormtrooper shouted. "Focus fire!" A dozen blasters converged on Ghost Rider. The energy washed over him harmlessly. He swung his chain in a wide arc, and 3 stormtroopers went down, alive but unconscious, their armor dented and their bodies bruised. The spirit wanted to judge them all, to force them to face their sins. But Johnny retained enough control to recognize these were just soldiers, doing their jobs, not personally responsible for the Empire's crimes. The distinction mattered. The rider had learned over decades that judgment had to be proportional. Not everyone wearing a uniform deserved damnation. "Fall back," the squad leader ordered. "Retreat to the rear transport." The stormtroopers withdrew in good order, covering each other as they fell back, professional to the end. They loaded onto the rear transport, which immediately accelerated away from the ambush site. The lead transport followed, leaving the damaged middle transport behind. Ghost Rider watched them go. Could have pursued, could have hunted them down and delivered judgment on every guilty soul,
But that wasn't the mission. The objective was the supplies, and they'd been secured. The flames receded. Johnny Blaze stood in the canyon, human once more, exhausted but satisfied. Around him, the rebels emerged from cover and approached the abandoned transport. "Clear," Terran called. "Jor, Mila, check for booby traps. Nix, get that cargo bay open. Everyone else start loading. We've got maybe 20 minutes before Imperial reinforcements arrive." The team moved with practiced efficiency. The cargo bay doors opened to reveal crates marked with medical symbols. Antibiotics, surgical supplies, Bacta patches, pain relievers. Everything a community needed to survive in the harsh desert. And the Empire had confiscated it all, probably to sell on the black market or simply destroy. Johnny helped load crates onto the speeder trucks the rebels had brought. His supernatural strength made the work easy, and within 15 minutes they'd transferred everything valuable. Terran set demolition charges on the transport itself. No point leaving equipment for the Empire to recover. "Good work," she said, approaching Johnny as the team prepared to disperse. "You handled those walkers like they were toys. Been fighting worse things for years. But this felt different. Those soldiers, some of them were just kids, following orders." "That's the Empire's genius," Terran said quietly. "They recruit young, indoctrinate thoroughly, and turn people into weapons. Some stormtroopers are fanatics. Others are just scared kids who joined because they had no other options. It makes it hard to hate them individually, even when you hate what they represent collectively." Johnny understood that complexity all too well. The spirit of vengeance judges individual sins, but it struggles with systemic evil, the kind of guilt spread across millions of people, each contributing a small piece to a larger atrocity. How do you judge an empire? Burn it all down? Save those who can be saved? Draw lines between the guilty and the merely complicit? He didn't have answers, just more questions. The demolition charges detonated, destroying the transport in a fireball that echoed through the canyon. The team scattered, each member heading to different safe houses across Tatooine. Johnny rode with Terran on a speeder bike, wind whipping past as they raced across open desert. "So, what do you think? Still neutral in this war?" Terran said over the engine noise. Johnny considered. He'd seen the Empire's casual cruelty, confiscating medical supplies from desperate people. Seen stormtroopers who were both victims and perpetrators of the system that created them. Seen rebels fighting with insufficient resources and unquestionable courage. It wasn't simple, but the Spirit's judgment was clear. The Empire was guilty. Maybe not every individual soldier, but the institution itself. "I'm not joining your rebellion, not officially. But if I see the Empire doing something that needs to be stopped, I'll stop it. That work for you?" Terran smiled. "It's more than we had yesterday. I'll take it." They arrived at a safe house hidden in the Jundland wastes, an abandoned moisture farm that looked uninhabitable from the outside, but had functional facilities underground. The rest of the team trickled in over the next hour, all accounted for and uninjured. A successful operation by any measure. That night, they distributed the medical supplies to moisture farming families who'd lost access to health care when the Empire's confiscation orders came down. Johnny watched his parents clutch antibiotics that would save their children from infections, watched elderly beings receive pain medication for injuries the Empire wouldn't treat, watched hope return to faces that had been lined with despair. The spirit of vengeance purred contentedly in his chest. Justice. This was justice, taking from the guilty and giving to the innocent. Simple, pure, righteous. But Johnny knew it was a temporary victory. The Empire would send more troops, confiscate more supplies. The cycle would continue. And he was just one man in a galaxy of billions, facing an enemy with unlimited resources. Still, one victory was better than none. One family saved was worth fighting for. He stepped outside, looking up at the alien stars. Somewhere up there, Vader was probably planning his next move. The Emperor, this Palpatine figure, was pulling strings across the galaxy, and Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider, was caught in the middle of a war he barely understood. "What do you think?"
he asked the spirit silently. "Can we make a difference here?" The spirit didn't answer in words, but Johnny felt its certainty, its hunger for justice, its absolute conviction that evil must be punished wherever it existed. "Yeah," Johnny said to the stars. "That's what I thought." Tomorrow, he'd figure out his next move. Learn more about this galaxy and its conflicts. Maybe find a way home. But tonight, he'd rest knowing he'd done something right. And in the morning, the hunt would continue.
The safe house received an encrypted transmission 3 days later. Johnny was practicing control exercises, holding the spirit's transformation at partial manifestation, letting Hellfire flicker across his hands without fully becoming the rider, when Terran burst into the underground chamber, her face tight with concern. "We have a problem," she said. "The Empire's response to our convoy raid. They've sent Inquisitors." Johnny let the flames extinguish. Inquisitors? Vader mentioned them. Force users who hunt other Force users, right? Worse than that, they're former Jedi who turned to the dark side. They know every technique, every fighting style, every hiding place the Jedi used. And they're coming to Tatooine specifically looking for you. Terran activated a holographic display showing 2 figures in dark armor. The third sister and the fifth brother, both extremely dangerous. The third sister appeared human, thin, intense, with dark skin and eyes that burned with barely contained rage. The fifth brother was massive, a gray-skinned humanoid with distinctive facial features and a lightsaber that looked like it could cleave through starship hulls. Both wore armor that blended Imperial design with something more ancient and predatory. Why are they coming for me? I'm not Force-sensitive. The Empire doesn't know what you are, and the Inquisitorius operates on the principle that anything unusual with supernatural power is either a hidden Jedi or a potential threat to Imperial control. They'll capture you if possible, kill you if necessary, and torture anyone who's helped you in the process. Terran's hand moved to her blaster instinctively. "We need to evacuate. Get you off-world before they arrive." "When do they land?" "Within an hour. They're coming fast, and they're not subtle. Local informants say they've already started questioning people in Mos Eisley, breaking into homes. The third sister especially. She's ruthless. Killed 3 civilians yesterday just for refusing to answer her questions." The spirit stirred. Torture. Murder of innocents. These Inquisitors carried the same guilt as Vader, perhaps worse because they betrayed their original purpose. The rider hungered to judge them, to make them face the suffering they caused. Johnny saw the hunger in his own reflection on the metal wall, saw his eyes flash with inner fire. "No, I'm not running." "That's suicide," Terran argued. "You fought Vader to a draw, but that was one-on-one. 2 Inquisitors working together, with Imperial support. That's different mathematics." "Then I'll change the equation." Johnny stood, rolling his shoulders. The spirit was eager now, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Where are they landing?" "Docking Bay 94 in Mos Eisley." "But Johnny—"
These Inquisitors, they hunt people who can't defend themselves, torture innocents for information. That makes them guilty, and I specialize in the guilty." Johnny headed for the surface exit. "Tell your people to stay clear of Mos Eisley. This is going to get loud." Terran grabbed his arm. "You're walking into a trap. They want you to confront them. It's how the Inquisitorius works. Draw out targets with violence, force them to reveal themselves." "I know it's a trap," Johnny said quietly. "That's why I'm going. Because if I don't, they'll keep hurting people until I do. Better to face them on my terms." He saw the conflict in Terran's expression, the tactical part of her brain screaming that this was strategically foolish, the human part recognizing that sometimes strategy had to yield to necessity.
Finally, she released his arm. "There's a speeder bike in the hangar. It's fast, and the Empire hasn't flagged the transponder yet. Take it." She paused. "And Johnny, don't die. We need people like you." "I'll do my best," Johnny promised. Then he transformed. The shift was instantaneous, flesh burning away, hellfire manifesting, the Ghost Rider emerging fully formed. But this time, he maintained enough of Johnny's consciousness to speak clearly. "If I don't come back, tell your rebellion something. The Empire is guilty. Every atrocity, every murder, every act of oppression. When the time comes for final judgment, the debt will be paid in full." He didn't wait for Terran's response. The Ghost Rider mounted the speeder bike, and it roared to life. Engine supercharged by Hellfire, metal glowing red-hot where his skeletal hands gripped the controls. Then he shot out of the hangar and across the desert toward Mos Eisley, leaving a trail of burning sand in his wake. Docking Bay 94 was cordoned off by stormtroopers. When Ghost Rider arrived, the Inquisitor's ship, a sleek Imperial vessel painted in threatening black, sat on the landing pad, its boarding ramp extended. Citizens of Mos Eisley had been cleared from the area, either by force or their own survival instincts. The only beings present were Imperial troops and two figures in dark armor who radiated menace. The third sister turned as Ghost Rider's speeder roared into the docking bay. Her hand moved to the lightsaber at her belt, a distinctive weapon with a spinning ring of secondary blades. "So, the anomaly reveals itself. How convenient." The fifth brother cracked his knuckles, his massive frame shifting into a combat stance. "I sense no force presence. How did this thing resist Lord Vader?" "We'll find out," the third sister replied. Her lightsaber ignited, a red blade that hummed with malevolent energy. "Capture it alive, if possible. The Emperor wants to study it. But if it resists," she smiled without warmth, "then we provide a corpse." Ghost Rider dismounted, his burning eyes fixed on the Inquisitors. The spirit of vengeance looked at them and saw their sins laid bare. The Jedi they'd betrayed, the younglings they'd murdered during Order 66, the innocents they'd tortured in service to the dark side. Both were drowning in guilt, their souls corrupted beyond any redemption Johnny had witnessed outside of literal demons. "You were supposed to be guardians," Ghost Rider said, his voice echoing across the docking bay. "Protectors of the innocent. You betrayed everything you stood for, every vow, every principle, for power, for survival, for the dark side's empty promises." The third sister's smile faltered. "What are you?" "Judgment." The rider's chain manifested, wreathed in hellfire. He swung it in a wide arc, and the stormtroopers scattered. Those who didn't move fast enough found themselves wrapped in blessed iron that burned with supernatural heat. Screams echoed, armor melted, and the Inquisitors attacked. They moved with force-enhanced speed, faster than human reflexes should allow. The third sister came low, her spinning lightsaber aimed at Ghost Rider's legs. The fifth brother came high, his double-bladed weapon descending in a crushing overhead strike. Coordinated, professional, deadly. Ghost Rider's chain intercepted both blades simultaneously. Hellfire met plasma, and for a moment neither yielded. Then the rider pulled, yanking both Inquisitors off balance, and followed with a kick that sent the third sister crashing into a stack of cargo crates. The fifth brother recovered first, using the Force to hurl debris, barrels, crates, chunks of duracrete from the damaged bay floor. Ghost Rider walked through the assault, flames burning away anything that came too close. The Inquisitor's frustration was palpable in the Force, his dark side energies swirling chaotically. "You cannot win," the fifth brother growled. "We are servants of the Emperor. The dark side makes us invincible." "The dark side makes you guilty," Ghost Rider replied. He closed the distance in 3 strides and grabbed the Inquisitor's face with one skeletal hand. The Penance Stare activated. The fifth brother's mind exploded with the suffering he had caused. Every Jedi he'd betrayed, every Padawan he'd slaughtered, every innocent crushed under Imperial tyranny. The spirit forced him to experience it all. Decades of accumulated sin compressed into a single, endless moment of agony. His connection to the dark side provided no protection. If anything, it amplified the effect, his own twisted emotions feeding back into the Stare's power. He fell, convulsing, his mind shattered by the weight of his own guilt. The third sister screamed in rage and terror. She'd watched her partner collapse without Ghost Rider landing a conventional blow. She knew instinctively that this creature operated on principles that defied everything she'd learned about combat and the Force. "What did you do to him?" she demanded. "Showed him the truth. Would you like to see yours?" She unleashed Force lightning, crackling energy that had killed Jedi Masters. It struck Ghost Rider directly, and for a moment the third sister felt hope. But the Hellfire absorbed the lightning, grew brighter, burned hotter. The rider advanced through the attack like it was rain.
The third sister fell back, her confidence crumbling. She reached out through the Force, calling for reinforcements. More stormtroopers poured into the docking bay, dozens of them, all with weapons trained on Ghost Rider. A support walker stumped into position, its heavy cannons charging. "Kill it," the third sister commanded. "All weapons, maximum power." The docking bay erupted with blaster fire. Hundreds of shots converged on Ghost Rider from every angle. The walker's cannons fired, explosive rounds that could level buildings. Smoke and flame filled the bay, obscuring everything in a hellstorm of destruction. When the smoke cleared, Ghost Rider stood unmoved. The duracrete around him had been reduced to molten slag. Stormtroopers lay scattered, their weapons overheated and useless. And the Imperial walker had collapsed, its legs severed by the rider's chain during the assault. Only the third sister remained standing. She'd retreated to her ship's boarding ramp, lightsaber held in a defensive position. But her hands shook, her breathing was ragged. For the first time since embracing the dark side, she felt genuine fear. "You can't kill me," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "The Emperor will send Vader. He'll bring entire fleets. You'll be hunted across the galaxy." "Let him come," Ghost Rider replied. "Your Emperor, your Vader, every guilty soul in this empire. I'll judge them all." He advanced slowly, deliberately. Each step left burning footprints that scorched the duracrete. The third sister raised her lightsaber, but her resolve had broken. She was a predator who'd suddenly become prey, and every instinct screamed at her to flee. So she did. The third sister turned and ran up the boarding ramp, sealing the ship's hatch behind her. Engines roared to life. The vessel lifted off, escaping Tatooine's atmosphere in a desperate flight. Ghost Rider watched her go, making no attempt to stop her. The spirit could have pursued, could have ensured she faced judgment.
But Johnny's influence remained strong enough to recognize strategic value in fear. Let her run. Let her tell her Emperor and Vader what she'd witnessed. Let them know that something existed in their galaxy that couldn't be controlled, contained, or killed by conventional means. Let them be afraid for once. Ghost Rider surveyed the carnage in Docking Bay 94. The fifth brother lay catatonic, his mind destroyed by his own guilt. Stormtroopers groaned in pain, their armor melted or cracked. The Imperial presence on Tatooine had been dealt a significant blow, not enough to liberate the planet, but enough to make them hesitate before hunting innocents. The flames receded. Johnny Blaze stood human once more, exhausted but satisfied. Around him, citizens of Mos Eisley cautiously emerged from hiding. They stared at him with mixtures of fear, awe, and something that might have been hope. An elderly human woman approached slowly, holding a child's hand. Are you here to save us?" Johnny looked at her weathered face, saw the hardship etched into every line, and felt the spirit stir with protective fury. This was what the Empire did. Grind down good people until nothing remained but desperation and fading hope. "I'm here to make things right," Johnny said. It wasn't quite an answer to her question, but it was the truth. "The Emperor wants me. That means they'll focus on me instead of you. Use that time. Survive. And when the rebellion comes, if it comes, be ready." He didn't wait for her response. The speeder bike was damaged but functional, and Johnny needed distance from Mos Eisley before Imperial reinforcements arrived. He mounted up and rode into the desert, leaving behind burning wreckage and the first stirrings of something dangerous: hope. Behind him, citizens whispered stories about the burning skeleton who'd faced Inquisitors and walked away. Some called him a demon, others a guardian spirit. A few, more poetically inclined, called him the Ghost Rider. Judgment manifest, vengeance incarnate, and proof that the Empire wasn't invincible. The stories would spread, across Tatooine first, then to other worlds through smuggler networks and rebel communication channels. And somewhere in the imperial capital of Coruscant, an emperor would hear those stories and recognize a new threat to his carefully constructed order. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, Johnny Blaze rode through alien desert under unfamiliar stars, the spirit of vengeance purring contentedly in his soul, and knew that, for better or worse, he'd just declared war on an empire. The galaxy would never be the same.
The summons arrived through channels Johnny was still learning to navigate in this galaxy. Not a transmission or hologram, but a force-sensitive courier, a young Twi'lek woman who found him in the Jundland wastes and delivered a message with trembling hands before disappearing into the desert. The message was simple, written in precise basic on actual flimsiplast. "The Emperor requests your presence. Coruscant, Imperial Palace. Refuse and Tatooine burns." Johnny read it twice, then let Hellfire consume the flimsiplast until only ash remained. The spirit of vengeance recognized the threat for what it was, not negotiation, but ultimatum. Come alone and face judgment, or innocents would die in the thousands. It was the oldest play in the authoritarian playbook, and it worked because people like Johnny couldn't ignore it. "Bastard knows exactly what buttons to push," Johnny muttered. Terran had given him enough information about Emperor Palpatine to understand what he was facing. A Sith Lord who'd orchestrated the Clone Wars, manipulated the Republic into becoming an empire,
and commanded the dark side with power that made Vader look like an apprentice. Because that's exactly what Vader was, Palpatine's apprentice, broken and remade into the Empire's enforcer. The rebel cell had evacuated after the Inquisitor incident, scattering across Tatooine to avoid Imperial reprisals. But they'd left Johnny with resources. A small starship called the Dust Runner, piloting instructions downloaded into a datapad, and coordinates for Coruscant. Terran's final words echoed in his memory. If you're going to the Emperor, you're probably going to die. But if there's any chance you can hurt him, take it, for everyone he's killed. Johnny prepped the Dust Runner for launch. The ship was old, held together by prayer and contraband parts, but it had a working hyperdrive and enough fuel for one jump. He'd learned the basics of piloting through trial and error. The controls weren't that different from motorcycles, just with 3 additional dimensions and the constant threat of explosive decompression. The spirit was eager, burning hot in his chest. It sensed the magnitude of sin waiting in the Imperial capital, a planet-sized city ruled by darkness incarnate, where suffering was policy and oppression was law. The rider wanted to judge it all, to burn away the corruption at its source. But Johnny Blaze knew this was a trap, knew Palpatine wasn't summoning him for negotiation or surrender. The Emperor wanted to study him, control him, or destroy him, possibly all 3. Walking into the heart of Imperial power was objectively insane. He did it anyway. The Dust Runner lifted off from Tatooine's surface, punched through the atmosphere, and entered the black void of space. Johnny engaged the hyperdrive with fingers that still felt too human to be piloting alien technology. Reality stretched, stars became lines, and the ship jumped to light speed. The journey to Coruscant took 8 hours through hyperspace lanes that the Navicomputer handled automatically. Johnny spent the time in meditation. Not the peaceful kind Jedi apparently practiced, but the brutal self-discipline required to keep the spirit of vengeance from consuming him completely. The closer they got to Coruscant, the hungrier the rider became. It sensed the density of sin waiting at their destination, and its need for judgment grew overwhelming. "Not yet," Johnny whispered to the demon riding his soul. "We need information first, need to understand what we're facing." The spirit didn't argue with words, but Johnny felt its impatience, its absolute certainty that hesitation was weakness. The rider had existed for millennia, judging the guilty across dimensions. It had faced gods and demons. What was one emperor? Johnny hoped they wouldn't have to find out the hard way.
Coruscant materialized from hyperspace like a nightmare made manifest. The entire planet was one continuous city, billions of beings packed into towering structures that stretched kilometers into the sky and deep into the planet's crust. Space traffic filled orbital lanes in carefully controlled patterns, with Imperial Star Destroyers and smaller warships enforcing order. The sheer scale was overwhelming. Johnny had seen New York, Tokyo, major Earth cities. This was different. This was what happened when civilization consumed an entire world. "Dust Runner, transmit identification codes," a mechanical voice demanded over the comm. "Imperial traffic control." Johnny activated the codes Terran had provided, falsified credentials identifying him as a freelance cargo hauler. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, "You are cleared for landing. Bay 2187, level 1313. Maintain designated approach vector. Deviation will result in defensive fire." The ship descended through layers of traffic, past gleaming towers where the wealthy lived, through middle levels of commerce and industry, down into the depths where sunlight never reached. Level 1313 was Coruscant's underbelly, a place of crime, poverty, and beings the Empire had deemed unworthy of surface life.
Johnny's sensors registered polluted air, failing infrastructure, and energy signatures suggesting frequent violence. Perfect place for a trap. He landed the Dust Runner in the designated bay, a cramped space surrounded by derelict ships and suspicious characters. The moment he powered down the engines, he felt them. Force users. Multiple signatures surrounding the bay in a coordinated pattern. Not Inquisitors this time. Something else. Johnny stepped off the boarding ramp and found himself facing a dozen figures in crimson armor. Imperial Royal Guards, Palpatine's personal protectors, elite warriors trained in both conventional combat and force techniques. They stood in perfect formation, force pikes held at attention, their helmets hiding any trace of humanity. At their center stood a figure that made Johnny's skin crawl even before the spirit reacted. An old man in dark robes, leaning on a cane, with a face that looked like melted wax and eyes that burned with malevolent yellow light. Emperor Palpatine, the source of the Empire's darkness, the architect of galactic suffering. The spirit of vengeance exploded with hunger. Johnny barely held the transformation back, his eyes flashing with hellfire, his skin crackling with heat. Every instinct screamed to let the rider loose, to judge this guilty soul immediately and completely. But Palpatine simply smiled. "Fascinating," the Emperor said, his voice like poison wrapped in silk. "Such rage, such righteous fury, and yet not the Force, not the dark side, though it shares certain qualities." He took a step closer, and the royal guards moved with him in perfect synchronization. "What are you, Ghost Rider? What manner of being crosses dimensional barriers to land in my empire?" "How do you know that name?" Johnny demanded, fighting to keep his voice human. "I know many things. The Force grants me insights. Visions of possible futures, echoes of distant pasts, and whispers from realities adjacent to our own." Palpatine's yellow eyes studied Johnny with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "You are from a dimension where my empire does not exist, where the Force is unknown, and yet you wield power that rivals the greatest Force users. Power that even Lord Vader could not overcome. Is that why you summoned me? To study me like a lab rat?" "Partly." Palpatine gestured, and the royal guards parted, creating a path deeper into level 1313. "Walk with me, Mr. Blaze. I wish to show you something." It was absolutely a trap, but Johnny followed anyway, because the alternative was fighting here and now, and even the spirit's hunger recognized they were surrounded by elite warriors in the heart of enemy territory. Better to see what Palpatine wanted before unleashing judgment. They walked through the Undercity's corridors, past beings who pressed themselves against walls in terror at the Emperor's presence. Palpatine moved slowly, seemingly frail, but Johnny sensed the power coiled within him. Dark side energy so dense it was almost visible. Corruption so deep it had fundamentally changed his physical form. "Tell me," Palpatine said conversationally, "what do you see when you look at my empire?" Oppression, suffering, billions of people ground down under authoritarian control, soldiers who've been turned into weapons, innocents who live in fear. Johnny didn't bother softening his assessment. "I see guilt on a scale I've rarely witnessed. And yet, you see only part of the picture. Before the Empire, there was the Republic, a bloated, corrupt democracy that allowed suffering through bureaucratic incompetence rather than directed policy. The Clone Wars ravaged the galaxy, trillions died, Entire species were rendered extinct. Chaos reigned. I brought order from that chaos, peace through strength, unity through control. Peace? Johnny's hands clenched. You call this peace? I call it survival. The galaxy is vast, filled with threats you cannot imagine. The Sith once fought the Jedi in wars that shattered planets. Ancient evils slumber in the unknown regions. And beyond our galaxy, in the void between realities, there are things that would devour all life if given the opportunity. My empire is a bulwark against that darkness. Imperfect, yes. Cruel, perhaps. But necessary.
The spirit roared in Johnny's mind. The Emperor's words were lies, justifications for atrocity, the same rhetoric every tyrant used to excuse their crimes. But there was a kernel of truth buried in the deception. This galaxy did face threats. Johnny had seen evidence of ancient conflicts, force-powered civilizations that had risen and fallen. The question was whether Palpatine's empire was the solution or just another manifestation of the problem. "You didn't summon me for a philosophy debate," Johnny said. "No, I summoned you because you represent an opportunity." Palpatine's smile widened. Power from beyond the Force. Judgment that cannot be corrupted or turned aside. In your home dimension, you served as a spirit of vengeance, punishing the guilty, protecting the innocent. Imagine what you could accomplish with the Empire's resources. Imagine hunting down truly evil beings with Imperial support. No more struggling alone against demons and devils. No more limitations. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you purpose. The Empire has many sins, yes, but we also hunt actual monsters, slavers, pirates, warlords who prey on the helpless. Join us. Use your power to judge those who deserve judgment. In return, I will provide you with technology to return to your dimension when your work here is complete. It was a good offer, almost tempting. The spirit could sense the genuine evil that existed in this galaxy, beings whose crimes made the Empire look merciful by comparison. But Johnny had learned to recognize manipulation when he heard it. "And what would you get out of this arrangement?" he asked. "A weapon that cannot be turned against me. A judge whose verdict I trust because it operates independently of my influence." Palpatine's eyes gleamed, and perhaps in time, an understanding of power that exists beyond the Force, knowledge that could protect the galaxy from threats even I cannot face alone. Johnny looked at the Emperor, this ancient Sith Lord who'd orchestrated galactic suffering in pursuit of order, and made his decision. No. Palpatine's smile didn't falter. No? You're guilty. Everything you've done, every atrocity committed in your name, every life destroyed by your empire, you carry all of it, and sooner or later, you'll face judgment for it. Ah, Palpatine nodded slowly. Then you choose death. Unfortunate. I had hoped you would be reasonable. The royal guards moved instantly, force pikes igniting with energy. They attacked in perfect coordination, 12 elite warriors striking simultaneously from multiple angles. Johnny didn't try to fight them as a human. He simply released the spirit. The transformation erupted like a supernova. Hellfire consumed flesh, manifesting the Ghost Rider in full apocalyptic glory. The viewing platform's temperature spiked 2,000 degrees in seconds. Metal melted, Duracrete cracked, and the rider's chain whipped out in a blur, wrapping around 3 guards simultaneously.
The blessed iron burned through their armor like paper. They screamed, actual audible screams despite their vaunted discipline, and collapsed. The other guards pressed their attack, force pikes striking the rider's skeletal form with energy that could kill Jedi. But Ghost Rider was no Jedi. The spirit of vengeance existed beyond the Force, beyond conventional power structures. The pike's energy dissipated against hellfire that burned with the fury of divine judgment. Palpatine watched with fascination rather than fear. "Extraordinary! You truly are immune to the Force. I can feel nothing when I reach for you through the dark side. It's as if you don't exist in the same reality." Ghost Rider's chain lashed out toward the Emperor, but Palpatine moved, faster than his frail appearance suggested, dark side energy propelling him aside. Force lightning erupted from his withered fingers, not in weak bursts, but in a torrent of crackling blue-white energy that could level buildings. It struck Ghost Rider directly. The hellfire absorbed it, grew brighter. The rider advanced through the lightning storm like it was rain. For the first time, Johnny saw something flicker in Palpatine's eyes, genuine surprise. The Emperor unleashed more power, drawing on dark side reservoirs accumulated over decades of Sith mastery. The viewing platform collapsed under the assault's intensity. Beings in the Undercity Dolo fled in terror as energy arced between buildings. Ghost Rider walked through it all, unstoppable, inexorable. Judgment incarnate. "Impressive," Palpatine admitted, his voice strained. "But even you have limits." He gestured, and the space station far above Coruscant fired. A precision turbo-laser strike, enough energy to vaporize a city block, lanced down from orbit. It struck the viewing platform, and the entire level exploded in fire and destruction. When the dust settled, Ghost Rider stood in the center of a crater, flames dancing across his bones. Around him, nothing remained but molten metal and shattered dreams. The royal guards were gone, killed by their own emperor's orbital strike. Palpatine himself had vanished, likely teleported away through some force technique. But Johnny felt the message clearly. The Empire could destroy him. Maybe not in direct combat, but through overwhelming firepower. Orbital bombardment, fleet-level attacks. The Empire's resources were limitless, and Palpatine wouldn't hesitate to use them all. The Spirit wanted to pursue, wanted to hunt Palpatine across the galaxy if necessary. But Johnny reasserted control, pulling the transformation back. He stood human once more in the ruins, bleeding from a dozen cuts where debris had struck him, and assessed the situation objectively. He'd survived, proven that neither Inquisitors nor the Emperor himself could kill him easily. But he'd also confirmed that staying on Coruscant was suicide. The Empire would throw everything at him until either he fell or the planet was destroyed. And thousands, millions of innocents would die in the crossfire. Time to leave. Johnny limped back to the landing bay where the Dust Runner waited. Miraculously, the ship had survived the orbital strike. He climbed aboard, fired up the engines, and blasted out of level 1313 before Imperial forces could respond. Planetary defenses tried to lock onto him, but he pushed the ship to maximum speed, racing for orbit. "Dust Runner, you are not cleared for departure. Stand down or be destroyed." Johnny ignored the warning. The ship broke atmosphere, entering space where Star Destroyers waited in formation. Turbo lasers tracked his movement. TIE fighters scrambled. The entire Imperial fleet prepared to vaporize one small transport. Then something unexpected happened. The comm crackled again, but this time with a different voice. Mechanical, filtered, unmistakable. "Let him go." Vader. Darth Vader was countermanding the Emperor's kill order. "My lord, the Emperor specified—" "I said let him go."
The Ghost Rider has made his position clear. Pursuing him now will only cause unnecessary casualties. Allow him to leave Imperial space. A pause. Then, "Yes, Lord Vader." The weapons lock disengaged. The TIE fighters held formation but didn't attack. And Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider, escaped Coruscant with his life and a new understanding. This galaxy's conflicts ran deeper than Empire versus Rebellion. There were players, powers, and agendas he'd only begun to comprehend. He engaged the hyperdrive randomly, jumping to coordinates that would take him far from Imperial centers of power. The Dust Runner leapt to light speed, leaving behind a furious Emperor, a contemplative Sith Lord, and a galaxy that would never quite be the same. The spirit purred contentedly in Johnny's chest. They'd delivered judgment against Inquisitors and faced the Emperor himself. The guilty had been marked, even if not fully punished. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, innocence had been saved by the Empire's distraction. It was enough. For now.
The Dust Runner emerged from hyperspace in the Outer Rim, a region of lawless systems, independent planets, and beings who'd learned to survive without Imperial or Rebel protection. Johnny set the ship down on a world called Lothal, a grassland planet with small communities and wide-open spaces that reminded him, distantly, of home. He'd spent weeks traveling since Coruscant, helping where he could. A Hutt slave operation dismantled on Ryloth, the slavers judged and left broken by the Penance Stare. A pirate fleet terrorizing trade routes near Rhodia, their ships burned to hulks by Hellfire. An Imperial garrison on Tatooine that had been executing suspected rebels. The commanding officer now catatonic, his mind shattered by experiencing his victim's suffering. The galaxy was learning about the Ghost Rider. Stories spread through cantinas and holonet channels the Empire couldn't fully suppress. A burning skeleton that hunted the guilty. A spirit of vengeance that couldn't be killed, corrupted, or controlled. Some called him a demon, others a guardian angel. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Johnny stood in Lothal's grasslands, under alien stars, feeling the spirit's contentment. They'd found purpose in this galaxy, not through armies or politics, but through individual acts of justice. One guilty soul at a time, one innocent saved, one atrocity prevented. Word had reached him through rebel channels. The Emperor was consolidating power, hunting for Ghost Rider with increased desperation. Vader continued his own pursuits, apparently convinced the Rider was a problem to be understood rather than simply destroyed. And across thousands of worlds, beings whispered about the day judgment would come for the Empire itself. Johnny didn't know if he'd ever find his way home to Earth. Didn't know if Mephisto's banishment could be reversed or if he was trapped in this galaxy permanently. But the spirit of vengeance had no concept of dimensional barriers or impossible odds. It recognized sin wherever it existed, and this galaxy had sin in abundance. "All right," Johnny said to the night sky, to the force he couldn't touch but could feel surrounding him, to whatever cosmic powers had brought him here. "If I'm stuck in this galaxy, might as well make it count. The Empire wants judgment, let's give them judgment." He felt the familiar heat building, Hellfire preparing to manifest, the Rider eager to continue the hunt. Somewhere out there, Palpatine plotted, Vader hunted, the rebellion fought with insufficient resources, and countless beings suffered under systems they couldn't challenge alone. But they weren't alone anymore. Ghost Rider mounted his motorcycle, manifested from Hellfire and will, eternal as the spirit itself, and rode across Lothal's grasslands. The engine's roar echoed like thunder, flames trailed in his wake. And across the galaxy,
Through the Force and through darker channels, the guilty felt a chill. Judgment was coming, not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but inevitably, inexorably, because some debts could only be paid in fire and suffering, and the Ghost Rider collected all debts eventually. The twin moons rose over Lothal. In the distance, a settlement's lights flickered, people living, hoping, surviving despite the Empire's oppression. Johnny Blaze, the spirit of vengeance, the Ghost Rider who'd crossed dimensions to land in a galaxy far, far away, rode toward those lights. There was work to do, guilty souls to judge, innocence to protect, and an empire to remind that power, no matter how vast, was meaningless against judgment itself. The hunt continued, and the galaxy would burn, but only the parts that deserved it.